Blog Talk Radio.
This is the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to a new Zeta report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network.
Florence has given us a wonderful lead-in to today's topic, which is what to do in the event of a hurricane. This is important for several reasons. One, they are occurring in atypical places lately. This was a Zeta Talk prediction. And also, they're getting fiercer and wetter and the like. But primarily, from the standpoint of Zeta Talk advice, we are predicting, as everyone who's listening knows, crustal shift, a pole shift in the future caused by Baraboo, and the world will have hurricane force winds during this crustal shift. So even if you're inland and you say, I don't have to worry, I'm not on the coast. Yes, you do have to worry. So I have two reasons, for wanting this subject. Before we get going, let me rattle off the disclaimer. In partnership with USAEBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes, and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact, it is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion, so bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit zetatalk.com or the Zeta Report on the YouTube. Questions from the chat and issues raised in the chat will be addressed toward the end of the hour after the main feature has been presented. Battening down. It is hurricane season here in the U.S. The standard preparation is to board up windows and doors with sheets of plywood and tie anything that can take flight down. Both the push and suction that wind flow can incite are factors. In other words, it's not just what blows in the window, but the fact that you have a window on the other side of the house that's blown out, so there's a sucking that goes on. Thus, taping the windows with a crisscross of tape can reduce shattering. The goal is more than preserving window glass. If the winds can get inside a structure, they will need an outlet, and the house could thus be torn apart. The dome shape. It is known that tornadoes rise up over hills and float over them, a factor of the airflow dynamics under the base of the tornado. They also rise above bodies of water. Thus, it has been repeatedly shown that tornadoes will rise up over monolithic domes. Winds tear apart more conventional structures by getting a grip on overhangs and appendages. Quoting a monolithic dome article regarding a 2008 tornado, when that thunder sound started, I told them that there was a funnel nearby. My granddaughter, who was watching out my bedroom window, yelled, "There's a funnel in the yard, it's here." The tornado then slid up on top of my dome and hovered above it for what seemed like a very long time. End of the quote. This has been repeatedly shown that tornadoes go up over hills. They actually avoid hills. I am fortunate enough to live between a couple of hills, and we don't get them, touching down here. We can stand on the porch and listen to the freight train go overhead, but they don't come down here. They come to the south of us, to the north. It's great. Get a dome. Projectiles. Hurricanes and tornadoes convert otherwise benign objects into projectiles with astonishing results. For instance, a piece of straw impaling a board. This is well documented in photos taken after hurricanes and in tests conducted in labs. So Don't think, haha, let's go out and stand in the wind like people stand in the surf and jump up and down. Not wise. Projectiles are fierce, like throwing knives. Okay, the hurricane cone. Hurricanes invariably travel in a predictable curve known as the cone of uncertainty. That is to say, the exact point it will make landfall is uncertain, but we are certain it will be within this cone. That was true for hurricanes landing on the east or Gulf Coast of America until 2017. During Hurricane Harvey, due to the earth wobble, Harvey landed, then backed up and moved on down the coastline to land again. The wobble has gotten worse, which of course was a Zeta prediction. Hurricane Florence's cone, and we just had that when the poor Carolinas got utterly deluged. Florence has also moved about. The cone first predicted to go up along the east coast, but then turned to go down along the coast. And this is atypical, as historical charts of hurricanes landing on the east coast show. It is the earth wobble that is causing this. This, in the opinion of the Zetas, but evidence of the wobble keeps piling up. But that's another story. I could talk for hours. The Correolis effect. The jet stream and the trade winds are also heavily influenced by the way the atmosphere curls away from the equator, pushing the air in a circle that first is pushed back away from the direction of rotation, in other words, toward the west, and then curls around to return to the equator. This is known as the Correolis effect. There are known hurricane or cyclone spawning regions, thus, such as the hurricanes that form in the Atlantic and strike the Caribbean, or the cyclones that form in Asia and strike the Philippines or Hong Kong. Toss the earth wobble into the mix and you have hurricanes and cyclones happening in unexpected places. Storm surge. A storm surge always accompanies a hurricane hit on the coastlines. Where they roll in as a tide, they are up to 20 feet higher than a normal tide. In the opinion of the Zetas, residents along coastlines should anticipate very high sloshing tides during the hour of the pole shift and in any severe wobbles that might occur ahead of that hour. Well, they've said that the tides during a severe wobble can be up to 200 feet, and the tides during the pole shift will be up to 500 to 600 feet, depending on tidal bore. Be inland from the coast is the generic caution for the pole shift. Be inland from the coast and 200 feet above sea level, and be aware of tidal bore possibilities, quoting the Weather Underground regarding Florence. We could definitely see a 20-foot storm surge from the Carolinas. The storm tide is the combination of the storm surge and the normal lunar tide, measured in height above sea level. High vulnerability of this coastline is because the continental shelf extends out more than 50 miles from shore, creating a large region of shallow water, less than 150 feet deep, just offshore, that forces storm surge waters to pile up to staggering heights. Well, to say nothing of the amount of rain. I mean, it was just a horror. Anyway, I think we're getting to that. So let's go into tidal bore. Tidal bore occurs when water has nowhere to go but up. Water can climb to unbelievable levels when being forced upward by the water pressure behind it. It cannot go back, and it must go forward. Water pressure is, after all, what provides a community with running water from that high water tank at the edge of town. Sandy, Hurricane Sandy. The devastation caused by a flood tide could be seen during Hurricane Sandy. The flooding in New York City and along the New Jersey coastland shows us just what can happen in large cities during a storm surge, especially since so many of the world's major cities are just at sea level. Sandy was relatively mild as a hurricane, being only 90 miles per hour, but the flooding was a shock and a devastation. Water poured into the underground below the cities. Only the Lincoln Tunnel to Manhattan remained open. Houston, the Houston Harvey. What did the storm surge do to Houston during Hurricane Harvey? Underwater, the streets covered with water. The downtown was underwater, but this was due primarily to 50 inches of rain as Hurricane Harvey stalled over Houston. But the slow drainage was due to the storm surge, which blocked the way. And Florence had, 40, 50 inches of rain in the Carolinas, and then it drained back down out of the Appalachians, and the rivers crested. And I think they're finally past their misery, but they had it's a pig farm and chicken farm. And all those dead sows and chickens are just by the thousands floating in the water. And then, of course, you have all that pollution, Well, Katrina flooded New Orleans primarily because the levee broke. But the flood level was due to the storm surge. What can we learn from Katrina floods in 2005? Primarily that levees break, even when built by the Army Corps of Engineers. The levee system had 59 breaches, with the flood wall along the 17th Street Canal the worst. Zeta talk on other worries, especially in areas that do not normally experience hurricane or flood. Early in the Zeta Talk saga, the Zetas warned against what they call the melting soil under the influence of flooding. Stagnant water lingering longer than usual can melt soil. If the water is on the move, draining, it can scour the soil. Buildings and bridges and roadways are undermined and destabilized. This was reported in the Houston area during Hurricane Harvey. The Zetas warned of this type of unexpected destabilization during their predicted pole shift, for instance, for Dallas, of all things, a city not expected to deal with high water. Quoting Zeta Talk on Dallas in the opinion of the Zetas, water melts the substrata as well as presses against foundations not built to resist such pressures. Thus, unless constructed on solid rock and with thick walls, most structures will lean in the winds and be pushed over by the rising water. Okay, Hurricane Sandy had fires. Who would think the water all around that fire would be a worry? Fires break out after earthquakes, but when they are sparked by downed electrical wires during a flood, there is no way to stop them. Can't pump water, the pumps need electricity. Can't get firefighters to the scene, the roads are blocked. Thus, during Hurricane Sandy in New York City and New Jersey, whole neighborhoods torched during the floods. Now, what about critters in the water? One of the lessons learned from Katrina and floods in neighboring Texas in recent years is that snakes and crocs and other such creatures can suddenly become your neighbors. They too may be seeking to escape the rising water. They may also use the rising water as one big highway to your place. Florence had, as I mentioned, toxic water from all the pigs and chickens. Snakes at least will eventually crawl away, but not so pollutants tossed about by hurricane force, winds, and floods. For Hurricane Florence that hit North Carolina recently, the worry was overflowing hog farm waste pits and coal ash pits, all toxic to man, and eventually mixing with the groundwater. Quoting the Daily Mail, the storm's potential path also includes half a dozen nuclear power plants, pits holding coal ash and other industrial waste, and numerous hog farms that store animal waste in massive open-air lagoons. Pewee. Sandy had water, too, down below that was very toxic. While the floodwaters swirled around New York City during Hurricane Sandy, all manner of pollutants were being spread about. The floodwaters washed things that were never expected to encounter water, like oil on the sidewalks, or the stuff that you never thought it was going to sit there and decay and go through its half-life or whatever, but oh no, all of a sudden it's in the floodwater, and Lord knows even what it is, chemicals, yuck. Where floodwaters usually involve mixing sewage in with the rainwater and ocean surge, sewage at least is biodegradable, though E. coli and hepatitis A can be spread by human sewage mixed into the water. What was sloshing around under New York City was anything but clean and unknown. So, bottom line, don't assume that water is safe to drink. Don't wait around in it either, Wait until Mother Nature cleans it up over a period of years, I guess. Power plants. Then there is the worry of nuclear power plants in the path of a hurricane. Power plants can be shut down ahead of time, but the cooling ponds need water flow. Per a discussion on the Godlike Production message boards, the procedure to follow is as follows, and I quote, "The operator lowers catting tubes around the rod assemblies. Water continues to circulate. There is still an immense amount of lingering heat in all the circuit loops and associated pipes for another day or longer." End of the quote. Well, the bottom line, if the floodwaters are cool, and if they're flooding the cooling ponds, maybe you're going to be okay. But you shouldn't, what if the floodwaters drain pretty quickly and there sits all the catting tubes, with no cooling water around them? That's a worry, but it's an unlikely worry. The main thing is shut down those reactors ahead of time, period. Distilling your water. What to do if you live in an area where your drinking and cooking water has been compromised by a toxic mix. The Zeta suggests distilling your drinking water, as this gets rid of parasites, germs, heavy metals, and anything subject to being vaporized, like petrol contaminants. You can get filters, and they work, except, now the filters have run out. Oops, I can't get to the store to buy more. I can't get on the internet to order more. Now what? So distillation is the bottom line drop-dead solution. It gets rid of heavy metals, all those germs, petrol contamination or various things that will vaporize. So if it doesn't, heavy metals fall out, and it's the answer. Generators. After prepping for high winds, the next thought is to have short-term supplies, drinking water and bread and peanut butter and lots of batteries. Stores have runs on such items ahead of a hurricane, along with gasoline-powered generators to replace a downed grid. All very good for the short term, but in the event of a long-term situation or the Zeta predicted pole shift, be prepared to distill your water and gen your own electricity for a long time. Being off the grid. We covered cranking your own electricity on March 3rd, 2015. Boy, that was 2.5 years ago, on the Zeta Report here at USA EBN. It's still available on the USA EBN site, I believe. It's on iPod or podcast, and on the Zeta Report on the YouTube channel. I quote from the blurb, "Off-grid energy options, direct current, reversed alternators in cars and electric tools. Wind and water always available. Windmill types, lawnmower windmills, windmills from car parts, steam engines, bike gen and crank applications, wood gas and methane, solar panels, carbon arc lamps when the light bulbs are gone." End of the blurb. So we covered a lot of subjects, and it's still as relevant today as it was 2.5 years ago, perhaps more so. Volunteerism. During Hurricane Harvey, volunteers came from everywhere, from other states, from nearby towns. Everyone jumped in. They ran boats up and down suburban streets, and when a military truck got stuck in the mud, arrived with a big wheel truck to pull them out. Katrina had these types of volunteers also, but they only arrived when it was clear that FEMA had failed. Folks trapped in their attics with no way out. People on their rooftops writing help and waving frantically. During Katrina, neighborhoods flooded steadily, the water rising till the old, the poor, and the trapped climbed up into their houses, into their attics, there to be trapped under the roofs. Meanwhile, neighbors helped neighbors, chainsaws unleashed to rescue old ladies from their attics, and anything that floated used to port the disabled and elderly to safety. Things have really stepped up, and I have noticed this trend. Now we jump to Florence. The Cajun Navy even came up to help rescue folks in North Carolina during Hurricane Florence. Crews arrived from Ohio to help repair the grid, and I heard that there was something like 26 different states sent people, I think mostly electricians, to help, wire things back up and put up new poles or whatever, putting up poles and fixing the lines. Quoting WDTN Weather, 21 linemen and support teams arrived after traveling 510 miles from Dayton Power and Light to Dominion, Virginia Power headquarters to provide assistance, end of the quote. And it was so heartening to see this. I mean, these people, they didn't wait to be asked. That was it. We're coming. And this has been an increase. I saw this increase in Harvey, and then I saw, and it was, neighbor help neighbor. They opened their home and come and stay with me, and they had one woman had 16 people and dogs, and people standing around on a street corner saying we have nowhere to go, and she'd drive by and pick them up, and everybody slept on the floor on sofas, and everybody made lots of coffee, and and then we had the boats running up and down the streets, the flooded streets, helping people. They didn't wait to be asked. It's just inspiring to see that. I think the Cajun Navy even got a mention by Trump when he went down there. All the way up, from the Gulf. During Hurricane Sandy, New York City was paralyzed, primarily by the need to shut down the electrical stations. Water and electricity, they just don't mix. That's electrocution. Phones, elevators, and lights were not working. Members of the National Guard went door to door delivering meals and supplies to the elderly and disabled. Neighbors helped neighbors with flashlights and groping downstairs where evacuations were required. Using junk. If stuck with high water for a length of time, don't forget the magic of houseboat living. Houseboat living is used around the world along coastlines, rivers, and inland lakes. Mobility, access to fishing, and being near the water are the reasons. But in the future, houseboats may be lifesavers. With rising seas and heavy deluge on the increase, it is also a logical step, even inland. One can prepare for a water world with scraps and junk, being a modern-day Noah. Why wait? Make this a fun project, so they laugh at you. John has an ark in his backyard. He made it out of junk. He says it will really float when the water's right. And then one day, John is on his boat, fishing his neighbors out of the water. So, float your boat. You only need a hull or objects under the houseboat that hold air. Everyone is familiar with inner tubes used in swimming pools or to float down rivers on hot summer days. But are you aware that these old soda bottles are also a flotation device? Anything that holds water is in seals. But you can actually, make flotation devices out of concrete. It's like a U shape, and as long as that U doesn't have any water in it, hey, you're floating. Plastic degrades under sunlight, but underwater has a longer life. Tie them under the houseboat, and you're in business. Western houseboats use long metal pontoons, but sealed wood hulls and lightweight bamboo work as well. Anything that is lighter than water or holds air somehow or changes the buoyancy principle, which means what you're displacing the water with is lighter than the water you displaced. That's the physics. Okay. Hand tools. When watching the news about the devastation of Hurricane Florence, parked along the East Coast and dumping horrific amounts of rain, contemplate what life inland would be like if the Zeta predicted pole shift occurs. This is hurricane force winds and torrential rains everywhere globally. Are you ready? Be 100 miles from the coast and 200 feet up. Don't be in river bottoms that will flood or ravines that might experience tidal bore. Dig a trench 2 feet deep to lie in. Avoid high winds and be prepared to rebuild shelter from trash afterwards. using hand tools. And that's the end of my prepared lecture. Half an hour. Andre, you still with me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Good review on some of the past episodes that we've had here on the USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. Obviously, those are simulcast or reposted on the Nancy Leader YouTube channel. So if you want to just scroll through there, the titles that we have for each individual episode pretty much reflect the subject that we're dealing with. Like today, we're talking about hurricanes, but if you go through the feed on the YouTube channel, you can see other things like safe locations, using off-grid tools, that sort of thing. Oh, the vitamin! Don't forget the vitamin episode.
Oh yeah,
love
that
one,
was
right,
wonderful.
Nancy?
Yeah. How you get all your vitamins from bugs and weeds? I kid you not. I systematically studied this. Every vitamin known that man needs, and where you get them. And if you eat bugs and some of those high vitamin C weeds, which is half of them. I mean, just not just scurvy grass, just everything. Out there I have sheep sorrel that grows amidst my grass and looks like grass, and that's full of vitamin C. So you will not have scurvy or pellagra or whatever. We've covered so many options. If you go to the Zeta Talk website, over on the left-hand side, it says New Zeta Talk. It is in the interviews, which is in the little drop-down. I think it's like the third item in the drop-down. The interviews have the long list of all these USA ABN monthly shows, and you'll find it, with a blurb written to explain what you'll find. Get in there and get a refresher, because this stuff is priceless. And I'm so happy that we've done this, and put it up, Andre. Well, we had those floods. We didn't have hurricane force winds here. We didn't have 40 to 50 inches of rain. But here, where I live on the Baraboo River, we had storms come through, and including tornadoes that battered a lot of areas nearby. Not my house, as I said. It's I can hear it overhead, but not here. But anyway, upriver, about 8 miles, they said, 5 inches of rain. I said, here it comes. And sure enough, up to 25 feet, up there at Reedsburg and Rock Springs and then North Freedom and then down to Baraboo, and when that happens, I almost become an island. I myself am not affected. I'm just above. Even my basement is just above the floodwater or the water line, but unless we drive north up the hill or past the cemetery, we can't get out. Everything is blocked. So of course everyone on the floodplain, Lord knows why they built there. We had one of these in 2008. It was, it's the 100-year flood. And now we've had a second 100-year flood, and who knows what next, but sandbagging. Everybody's sandbagging frantically to, and then they put a pump inside the circle of sandbags and pumping frantically to keep the river from, slipping into their house. And, if you don't, there goes, you have to move everything to the second level. And the worry is, if you don't sandbag, well, I think what they do is they go down and throw the circuits. They turn off the electricity at the poles. Right. That's what they do. And they do the same thing with gas. If you're getting gas, your little pilot light is snuffed. Now what? Well, now you're going to be poisoned and kaboom, So anyway, they have to do this. They have to run in and turn off the gas, do things at the street, do things at the pole, and then afterwards go back in after the water, everything dries out, turn everything back on and make sure, there's no sparks and no shorts. And it's just a nightmare. In the Asian countries, they build these houses on stilts, stilt homes, regularly. 20 feet up, there you are, climb the little ladder. And if they have a tide coming in, well, they're fine. They just say, wait a minute, where's that fishing line or fishing net or whatever? So, and a little bit of that is going on in Florida and places like that get hit by a lot of hurricanes, that the houses are now going up to where people live on the second floor, and the first floor is well, maybe it's park your car. I don't. Cars can get wet apparently and can dry out and be revived. Is that right? I think so.
Yeah,
I've
except
heard
for
of
seawater. Seawater
yeah, well,
screws up the electrical
that would make
connections
sense.
and copper
Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, you never want to purchase a flooded out. If you're looking through your vehicle records and you're looking to purchase a vehicle, if you see flood damage on the vehicle, generally speaking, hopefully you're getting a good deal on that car because, again, the electrical systems are the things that are affected with the freshwater damage from flooding. I mean, you can get a car running again after you dry it out, and sure, but it's not meant to be fully submerged. No.
Yeah, that's not intended. Yes, it's true. Speaking of unexpected that hurricanes are showing up in, and the odd path with Florence. Normally, hurricanes hitting the East Coast curl and go up along the East Coast, or they just slam inland. But they didn't know what Florence was going to do. First, they said it's going to go north. Whoops, and they said no, it's going to go south, which almost never happens. And finally, I think it just went inland because the wobble is worse these days. It's tipping, and if you're a wobble follower and you know what to look for, where the sun rises and sets, too early, too late, too far north, too far south, whatever, you see that, but there's lots of ways to measure it, but it is definitely getting, and of course what that affects is because it's moving the globe under its blanket of air, its atmosphere, and the same with the water. The air and the water don't want to move. The earth as a ball of rock does. And so therefore we have what appears to be sloshing water and winds, erratic winds, etc. So just to mention one of the newest occurrences just this last week is that tsunami that hit Palu in Indonesia. And everyone is astonished because now they're saying the tsunami appeared out of nowhere. There were no warnings. They said actually they turned off the warning because Palu is at the end of a long bay, where you can get something like tidal bore happening if the conditions were right. But it was just an earthquake that they had a little bit north of that area, and then a bunch of aftershocks. But all of a sudden they said, well, we turned off the alarm because from what we could see over there, 6 centimeters was all they expected, a higher storm surge to be, or not a storm surge, any tsunami potential from the quake north of that. Well, 6, I think, isn't that like less than an inch or centimeters tiny? So
6 centimeters, probably like 3 inches. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So they said, oh, okay, well, we don't have a tsunami, and no worry. And then within half an hour, here it comes, a wall of water at least 10 feet. Now they're saying some places experienced 30 feet, and they're showing all the, and the dead are counting up. Now they're at 1,200 or 1,300 and on. But the Zetas were asked a question. Why did this happen? Why was there a tsunami unexpected by everyone? They do.
Yeah, why was there no
analysis.
Warning? Yeah.
And usually you get a tsunami if you have a thrust, where one plate is striking another, and something goes up and down, that type of thing, where there's a displacement. But this was a slide area, and it was right in the middle of the plate. It wasn't even on the plate border. It wasn't on a fault line. It was expected. They didn't even know why there was a quake there, actually, because it wasn't on a fault line or anything. So they couldn't see that it was anything where something would go up and something would go down, not like that. And so, what? So the Zetas explained, because they have said, in the opinion of the Zetas in 2010, they said 7 of 10 plate movements. And the sun to plate, which is that lob that comes down off the Indo-Australian plate and holds Cambodia, Vietnam, all of Indonesia, blah, blah, blah. the Thunder Plate or plate, that it was going to be sinking because it was going to be shoved down under the curve in the Indo-Australia plate, which is like, a curve for includes India, and then swings around to include Australia, and the curve that is caused by. That's what caused the Aceh quake and tsunami in 2004 that was so serious, because it's right there where the Thunder Plate pushes down and under. Okay, so during this pushing down and under, there is compression, because you get the Pacific pushing in from the east, and then you get the push down and under and all that. So this caused, then they directed me to take a look at the depth of water all around that area in Indonesia. It's like, yes, there's land underwater, but the water is shallow. You can see that because it's colored light blue. But the bay going into Palu, it becomes very dark blue, right? There's deep water, right? Well, okay, so thin crust is what will give when under any kind of pressure. The Zetas have said rivers are there because the crust is thin and sags, and that's why water accumulates, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so anything that's down deep like that is thinner crust than the surrounding area, and therefore more subject to be the weak link, or what will give. So the Thunder Plate gets compressed, and that bay got compressed, which caused tidal bore. Because if you have a narrowing bay, where's the water going to go? So it went rushing up, and that's what happened. And I'll bet you if they took measures, they would find it used to be so many miles, maybe 5 miles, maybe now it's like 4.8 or something. I'm just guessing, that there's less distance across the bay now than there used to be, and so that's in the bottom line, folks, is we are living in these kind of times. You don't know where a hurricane's going to hit. You don't know when a tsunami is going to leap up and wash ashore. Sneaker waves, they're sometimes called, because of the wobble. You can have sudden storms rising out. Drought and deluge are worse. So
the South
be prepared
American roll
for the worst. Yeah, the South American roll is causing
one side floods, or one side gets a small tsunami, and the other side loses the ocean.
Yeah. The beaches go dry on the East Coast, and on the West Coast, we have sudden tsunamis. And over on the East Coast, suddenly there's all the seals saying, "Bark, bark." What happened? Because
with the water.
The beach went dry because of the wobble, and also South American roll, which is tilting the top part to the west. So you see this. I featured, I think, in my newsletters about a week ago, big quakes, about 6 all the way down along the Andes as it crosses over the Nazca Plate to the west, which was a prediction of the Zetas, that this would be part of the 7 of 10 plate movements. And then as it's rolling to the west, it's shoving the Caribbean plate down and ripping Trinidad in two. They have this line that goes across the island, and mud volcanoes that bubble up there. And now, this week, I think it is that I'm putting out a newsletter that includes the crunch in Colombia, Panama, Guatemala, and Mexico, where they have crumbling roads and dropping bridges and ripping open big crevasses, like almost all at the same time. Because basically the South American roll is shoving Mexico, the tip of Mexico, to the west, as well as Central America, etc. Crunch, and you can see the handiwork. It's not necessarily big earthquakes. It is, and it takes many forms, but for those with eyes to see, eyes wide open, this is what's going on. You can't get ready fast enough. At a bottom line, people talk about the bug-out bag, where you know what your medications are, or what the minimum batteries and cans of milk for the baby, or whatever you might need, so that you can grab and run if you have to, But long term will descend. When we watch what the rich are doing to prepare, and they are preparing. We've had an episode on that, you and I, Andre. They have these bunkers stocked, and we're saying, sure, and when the supplies run out, then what? And the Zetas who had been asked about that, and they think they're going to walk out like kings saying, we survived, you didn't, and you're all battered and bruised, and now we're the masters and you're the slaves, and we're going to send you to work and growing food for us or whatever. But it won't work out that way. The Zetas have dim prognosis for these elite, who will find that even the people that they thought were going to protect them from the starving hordes will turn on them